Whoa, someone just got happy back in kids' church. We have been going back to the future, starting out 2012, getting back to the future that God planned for us. And if you've been here through the months of January, then you have been here when we talked about getting back to our future by cutting loose the past, forgetting the former things and beholding the new things, the things that God had planned for us even when we were in our mother's womb, even clear back to the Garden of Adam and Eve 6,000 years ago, things that God predestined for humanity at large and you as an individual with great detail. We've learned to get back to the future by cutting loose all the past baggage of life that's holding us back. We've learned to get back to the future by getting back to the original mindset that God gave Adam. And we've been getting back to the future by getting back to the attitude of I can do all things through Christ Jesus. We're getting back to what God planned for us from the very beginning. Today we're going to get back to our future by looking at something else. And I want us to look at a story that I talk about a lot at Cornerstone. And it's a story that coincidentally enough is, pretty cool to be sharing on this Sunday with teenagers alert and on the edge of their seat and all ears and a soft heart ready just to receive the word of the Lord. It's a story of a young man. And we don't know how old he was. We know one thing. He was really too young to be doing what he thought he wanted to do. It's a story that's often called the prodigal son. Even though we know the story is more about the father, it's also about the son, which tends to be most stories of the Bible. The stories of God and this man that he made and how they're trying to learn how to connect together. This story is about a young man who decided that his dad was stupid. Didn't want to live in his house anymore. Oh man, you're crazy. What do you know? I let Hannah know this morning that I had come to the realization that when her and I are in a room, I'm the dumbest one in the room. We went by a church that had removed their nativity scene and the grass was yellow, and my wife said something that, they moved their nativity scene finally, and I said, yeah, I said, almost too late. I said, the grass has already started dying. And Hannah said, no, it's not, it's just starting to get green. And I said, well, you probably know a lot more about horticulture than me. You're probably right. I'm probably just stupid. She said, yeah. She said, when it's getting yellow, that means it's getting ready to turn green. I said, oh, well, I'm sorry. I used to be a professional landscaper, but they always told me that when it goes from green to yellow to brown. And when it comes out of the ground, the seed, it comes out green. It starts green. But I told her, I said, but I don't really know because I'm dumb. I said, I haven't lived as long as you. Now, how many of you parents can appreciate this little story this morning? And so when our kids become a little bit older, parents start getting dumber. And then it's amazing when kids hit 30 years old, it's amazing how smart their parents suddenly become. Just overnight, suddenly the parents become brainiacs. It's like, when did you get so smart, Dad? It's like, this is a young man who probably didn't think his dad really knew what he was talking about too much. His dad's probably doing some things that the son feels like is holding him back. And probably all the father's doing is probably not wanting him to produce certain fruit before it's time. As the Bible says, casting fruit before it's time. Because if it's not time and then cold weather comes, then it freezes on the vine or something happens prematurely and then the fruit doesn't abide on the vine. And God knows that, and so God raises up parents to try to hold kids back so they don't get ahead of schedule and mess up. This young man was bound and determined that he did not want to live in his father's house any longer. And he came and he did one of the most insulting things in Hebrew culture that a child could ever do, a young man especially. He came to him and he said, Father, I want my inheritance now because I'm out of here. The inheritance should not have been his actually till the father was dead. And so in essence the young man was saying, hey, old man, you're dead to me. Give me what's mine. I'm out of here. I know how to do this better than you do. And for 6,000 years, we understand that this story has been the story of God and humanity from the very beginning. From the very beginning, we can pull all kinds of personal things out of this story. We can personalize this story for any individual who's ever been a prodigal, which is a lot of us. But in the big picture, God gave us this story to show us the story of Him and humanity. He is the Father. And the Son lived in His house. It was called the Garden of Eden. And the Son basically came to Him one day and said, I'm smarter than you. Well, that's what he thought was going to happen when he ate the forbidden fruit, right? Now I'm going to be smart like Dad, maybe even smarter, and He won't be able to tell me what to do anymore. He took what he thought was his life, and even as Adam left the garden with what he thought was a good choice, which ended up not being a good choice. God said, now you're going to leave this garden, you're going to leave my home, and now you're going to go into a world that's filled with labor. It's filled with pain. It's filled with thorns. It's filled with stress. Life outside Daddy's house wasn't exactly what Adam and Eve thought it was going to be. The prodigal son finds out the same thing. That life outside the Father's house isn't exactly what he thought it was going to be. In fact, he takes what was his, that Dad maybe was setting aside, maybe some up for a college fund. Maybe he was putting it aside so when the son got married, he could have a home of his own, or who knows. But the son took his share and he squandered it, the Bible said, on wild living. I'm a man who understands what that terminology means because I spent 4.5 years of my life in wild living. Stubbed my nose at my earthly father, snubbed my nose at my heavenly Father, said, I'm out of here, I want to live my life for my own. The whole time they were saying, but Scotty, God's got such plans for your life. Don't mess it up. And I thought, well, you guys, how could you know that? Well, you're not even as smart as me. How could you know that? I became quite the prodigal. And the reason I tell the stories a lot because I'm a guy who can relate to the condition of the prodigal. When he left his father's house, said, I don't want you telling me what to do anymore. I don't want you running my life. He squandered all of his funds on wild living, and he went and he took a job with a pig farmer. His job was to feed the pigs. This young man spent long enough in this world of pig feeding to where he finally began to see himself as what he was doing. He was feeding the pigs, and he began to see himself as a pig feeder. That's who he was now. That's what he did. Every day he got up and he went to the pig pens and he wallowed in the mud with the pigs and he fed husks to the pigs. And evidently the job didn't pay too good because he was getting hungry. And he asked the pig owner if he could have some of the pods they were feeding to the pigs so he could eat because he was hungry. And according to the story, the pig owner would not share with him. We tell the story and we say, well, he was eating pig food. It's like, that's not true. He didn't even get to eat the pig food. But the farmer wouldn't share with him. Before long, he realizes what he has done. Just as Adam realized how terrible his choices were, just as I realized how terrible my choices were, this son began to realize how terrible his choices had been. He began to think, I need to go back home. I need to go back home. I need to be back in my Father's house. I love what KK was sharing this morning. She said, I've been away from the Lord for a while, and this past year I just wasn't with Him the way I had been before. She was expressing the classic prodigal heart. I came to a place I realized my life stunk outside of Father's house. As the Lord poured gas on her fire this weekend, she was brought into a fresh remembrance of how wonderful it is when you live in Father's house. And yes, you yield your life to Father and let Him call some shots in your life. Father knows best. We pick this story up just reading a few verses here. As the son has decided he's going to go back home to the father, but now he sees himself different than when he left the house. He sees himself now as a pig farmer. He sees himself now as a servant. Now you've got to understand that in Hebrew culture, We talk about the lowest of the low. You understand that because Hebrew people did not eat pork, that being a pig farmer is like the bottom tier. It's below the bottom tier. It's the ground beneath the ladder that has tiers. This kid has sunk as low as you can get in life. And he begins to see himself through that filter. A filter of failure, a filter of bad decisions, a filter where now he sees no value in himself, and he says, I'm going to go home and I'm going to beg for my father to take me back into his home as a servant. He didn't see himself as a son any longer. He saw himself as a servant. He thought, but my dad treats the servants pretty good. I'll go home and I'll be a slave. He had a slave mindset, not a son mindset anymore, but a slave mindset. We pick the story up, though, as Daddy sees him coming, and something amazing begins to happen. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. I want you to look at it. This is the cry from a son to a father. This is the prayer to the father. Just make me a hired hand. I'm not worthy to be a son anymore. This is his mindset. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. I want you to understand that what happened to this young man is classic. This is what happens in human beings all the time. Either we grow up in church and we decide we've got a better way to live. We make bad choices and our life ends up in a pig pen. And we begin to miss what we used to have. And we begin to realize I was better off with my father, but I don't know how to get back there. I'm not worthy anymore. I've sinned against him. He probably hates me now. I'm the last person he wants to see. The son is so bogged down and worried about how the father's going to perceive him. Will the father take me back? Will he not take me back? The father, of course, is looking at the situation completely different. There's never a thought in the father's mind, would I take my son back if he came back home? Of course he would. He's my son. He may be dead. He may be lost, but he's my son. How many parents, if their children, no matter what they had done, if they came back to him and said, I am so sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. Most parents would not even want or demand or need an explanation on anything. They would just grab their kid, pull them into their breast, and just hug them and kiss them and say, welcome home. I don't need explanations from my daughter. Despite what she thinks, I do know more than her. I do see a bigger picture than her. I understand what she goes through in life because I've already been there. And when my daughter messes up and she comes back many times, is it 8 years old already? She finds herself dealing with remorse and repentance. She comes and she crawls up on my lap and she kisses my cheek and she says, sorry, Daddy. And I kiss her little chubby cheek and I say, it's okay, baby. I don't need to lecture her because I understand she already learned her lesson. Her repentance, her remorse just confirmed that. I just got to take her back in my arms and say, I still love you, baby. I still love you. And I've still got great plans for your life. I'm still sending you to college. I'm still going to pay for your wedding if it doesn't get too expensive. Good news is I get to walk her down the aisle. sing a song to her, and then turn around and be the preacher. So I'm going to save a lot of money. I don't have to pay the preacher. I don't have to pay the wedding singer. And though I like to think I'm quite the macho kind of guy, I don't even mind decorating. The son has now got a twisted, sick, demented mind. How he perceives himself. Low self-esteem, low self-worth. The son does not see himself capable of being anything but a slave now. That's how he sees himself. When he comes home, the father sees him from a distance, and if you've heard the story, Lynn Hiles painted such a beautiful picture of this story when he was here last. As you know how the culture unfolds here, that the young man could be several towns away, and somebody would see him coming, know the story, and begin to send runners back to the father and say, guess what? Your son's coming back home. We don't know how far the father ran to meet his son, but the Bible said from a long way off, he noticed that his son was coming home. And he ran to him. Didn't even wait for the son to come completely to him. He ran to his son. And he began to do some very specific things, very intentional things, to try to suddenly shock and change the mindset of his son. The son says, I'm a sinner. I'm unworthy. I've sinned against you. I can only be a servant now. I'm only worth being a slave now. I have nothing to give of importance anymore. I have ruined my life. The father didn't even argue with him or debate it. The father said to a servant, he said, bring me the best robe in the closet. He's trying to tell his son something. He said, bring me my signet ring. The father would own this very special signet ring, the sign of authority. And if you share your signet ring with someone else, it means my authority has now become your authority. Whatever the son says, the father has just said it. And it carries just as much weight. The son has said, I'm a servant, I'm a slave, I'm a pig farmer, I'm unworthy. The father's saying, no, you're royalty. No, you still have dominion, authority in my house. You are still my son, seated with me in heavenly places. Now that you have come back home, I want you to understand the potential you had before you left has not been negated through your bad choices. Despite what those of us that grew up through the 20th century church may have been told, that now we must grovel for the rest of our life. And now we have lost our opportunity to be what God originally wanted us to be. He's trying to help the son understand you still have just as much potential as you ever had. We've lost some time here. I lost 4.5 years. I shared this story last week, and my carnal mindset thought, man, if I only wouldn't have wasted that time, where could I be today? But the reality is, for all I know, if it would not have been for those 4.5 years that I call lost years, I may have never been found in the capacity that I was found to be transformed in the way I was transformed, and we may not even be here today. Can't second guess those things. All we can do is say, I've sinned against my Father. I'm going home. I can't do it like this anymore. And go home and let the Father restore us, not just back into His house, but back into the position, maybe even past the position we originally knew we had. He's speaking to his son about potential. Potential. Saying, son, nothing has been changed. You were lost, but now you're found. You're back in my house. You were dead. Remember what God told Adam? He said, if you eat of this fruit, you will have to leave this place and you will die. And he was speaking of a spiritual death. He says, you were dead, but you're alive again. You're back in my arms. You're back in my house. You wear the robe of righteousness. You wear the signet ring of authority. Nothing has changed. For 4,000 years, God used all kinds of situations and all kinds of stories and all kinds of people to let humanity know, leading back up to the work of the cross, that place of restoration where prodigals could come back home. God was trying to tell us, nothing has been lost that can't be found. He would use people like Joshua to let us know you are still people who walk in authority, that can take ground wherever you set your feet. You can still rule, you can still reign, you can still be who you originally were predestined to be. If you were here as we talked about mindsets 2 weeks ago and attitudes last week, we understand it's a getting back to an original mindset. I am a son of God. I rule and I reign. It's getting back to those attitudes as nothing's going to stop me. I can do all things through Christ Jesus. And it's getting back to understanding the potential that we had from the beginning is the potential we still have. I love how God reminds us of this in the story of the Tower of Babel. Man has come from a post-flood season, and we don't know exactly how long it was, how many generations, but it had to be a bunch of generations because there was a bunch of people. And they're kind of traveling, they're hanging out, they're traveling, they're hanging out, and they come to a place where they decide they're tired of scattering around the earth. The problem with that was that God had already given them one command: to go spread across the earth and populate it. God had told them, you need to go replenish the earth. He said it to Adam. He said it again to humanity. After the flood, He said it again. Now go spread across the earth, scatter, replenish. The only thing wrong at the Tower of Babel, it wasn't because they were building a tower. The Bible never says God was mad at them for building a tower. Even though it was reaching to the heavens, and despite what I was told in Sunday school class as a kid, there's nothing in the story that says that man was trying to reach the places of God with his big tower. That's not what was really going on. They weren't even trying to become like God's building the tower. The only thing they were doing wrong was they said, we're tired of scattering, let's build a big old tower here. How many knows what a ziggurat is? That's kind of about what it's like a pyramid kind of thing. That's the only way they knew how to build probably that far back. And they said, let's just build a place where we can kind of set up camp here. This is going to be our home, and we can stop scattering everywhere. And that broke the original command of God. How could they go subdue the earth if they're not scattered across the earth to subdue it? Here's God's mind in this thing. So we see the story in Genesis in the middle of this Tower of Babel story. That ain't it. I didn't give it to you. My bad. This one's my fault. Take it back off before they know where we're going. This one I'll take, Micah. This one's all me, buddy. God said, do you trust me to tell you what God said? God said, wow, look at man. I'm going to use my translation here on this, if it's okay, the Pastor Scott translation. A little more contemporary. Wow, check out man. Man, when they put their mind to something and they get on the same page, they'll do anything. Nothing can stop them. They can accomplish anything they want to accomplish when they put their mind to it and they're in agreement. God was confirming the potential of humanity. Man can do anything when it's really in his heart to do it. And when they get together, two or more together in agreement, nothing will stop what they want to do. They were building something that had probably never been built before. It probably was pretty amazing for that time in history. We look back now at things that were built long ago in history, and you can't help but be amazed at the potential of humanity when you're wondering how they ever learned to rub two sticks together to make fire, and how they ever learned to carve a stone round for a wheel. And man just looks at it, he's got this potential for problem solving, and just he looks at things and he thinks about things, and he sees the dilemmas of life, and he's always had a MacGyver spirit from the very beginning, that he can look at a situation and he can resolve that thing, he can problem solve that, he can fix that. And man's always been like that. We think of this Tower of Babel, and instantly we think of the pyramids. And to this day, historians go back and they're looking at how those pyramids were built, and assuming that aliens did not do it. That's pretty impressive. Maybe not that impressive for an alien, but for a human being it was pretty impressive. First of all, the engineering mind to realize, okay, if we want something this big, we can't just start building walls straight up in the air. They're going to collapse. It's like, so we're going to stagger. We're going to staircase this. And the size of the stones, the way that they cut them, and the way that they maneuvered them around and put them in place, it's just mind-boggling. Man's potential has always been like that. My wife and I have been to several sites in the world. I got this little bucket list thing going on, and when you get my age, you will too. It's like there's things you want to see and do before it's too late. And so, we started our list a long time ago, and just places we wanted to go, things we wanted to see. Some of them kind of close, some of them not so close. We save our pennies. We shop for cheap tickets. We bid for tickets at ridiculous prices till somebody accepts our bid. We do what we got to do because it's not about the travel. It's about getting to that place and seeing that thing and experiencing it. It's just amazing. And you got your natural wonders of the world, and then you got your man-made wonders of the world. And I just want you to know they're all impressive. What God did and what man did, it's all impressive. When we went to China to get Hannah, we got to go outside of Beijing there. We were there just for 2 days, but we got to go to the Great Wall of China. 4,200 miles long. 4,200 miles long. It's incredible. They say you can see it from space, but that's folklore. It's not true. I haven't been to space, but I've heard people who have been say that's not true. Incredible feats. The architectural wonders of the world. I never got to see the Twin Towers before they fell. We went after they fell and saw the big hole. Over there, we went into the Empire State Building. Started to go to the top and had a little problem, which we won't talk about today, but no one ended up in jail, so it's all good. Now you're curious. I'm still not telling you. All I know, it wasn't me, my wife, Jackie, or Joyce that kept us from going to the top. Someone who's not here today. See, so come take this shovel out of my hand, please. Empire State Building. Empire State Building. How many's ever seen it? Seen pictures of it? Used to be the tallest building in the world. How many ever saw King Kong? Then you've seen the Empire State Building. That's an incredible feat. Because that building was built in 14 months. You know how long it takes us to build stuff now? I think we're regressing. We've been building the one building, taking the place of one of the Twin Towers up there. We've been in construction since 2007. It's about halfway up. 14 months. I've seen things like the Hoover Dam, and not just the design of it, but the time frame and just how that we resolved problems. And I love watching on the History Channel and Discovery Channel how we built certain things. And I know that my daddy's looking at us going, yeah, you go. You're just like me. You're a creator just like me. Look at the potential you have. I shared with you last summer when we went to Las Vegas and wanted to see the Grand Canyon. Had to see that big hole, man, for myself. Pictures just don't do. And we went out there and we stopped at the Hoover Dam and we went out to the Grand Canyon. But right there, even in Las Vegas, like you can't turn anywhere without seeing something that makes you go, wow, wow. Some of it God made. The red canyons out there, they're incredible. And truly, the whole Grand Canyon scheme, unless you see it, you can't even really understand how to appreciate it. And it's just, and you see the things that God has done and you go, wow. But you also see the things that man has done and you go, wow. And a bunch of old preachers long ago used to act like that was evil and man was crossing some lines. And I remember people really wrestling with the whole concept, should man be going to space, should he not? And God's like, whatever. Do it, man. If you can figure it out, go for it. Like we're crossing lines and God's going to write us off because we've stepped across the boundary somewhere. I don't see it that way. I know we can use whatever we make for good or for evil. That's always been the case. But I think God looks at us and goes, yeah, extract that potential. And we just progress and we progress and we progress. And if you were here last week, we talked about how that man stepped into all three earthly realms. God said, subdue, take dominion over the land and over the seas and over the air. And we've done it, man. We've created flying machines and water machines and land machines. And man, we've just subdued it all. We're doing what God told us to do. That's how you rule. That's how you reign. Potential. Potential, the potential of humanity. I love the word potential. The root word is the word potent. What does the word potent mean to you? Power. Power. Potential means the ability of the power. The ability of the power. The ability of the power. It's power possibilities. Potential. It's power possibilities. It's there if you can see it and if you can believe it. Miles Monroe, the great little Bahamian preacher, however you would say it. Love this guy. Was writing books and preaching on purpose years before anyone ever heard of Rick Warren. And this guy is just so powerful. He loves talking about potential. He says you go into any given town in the world, and especially in America, if you want to find the greatest source of potential in any community, just go to the graveyard. Go to the cemetery, because there's where the potential is. It was here. It was never tapped, and now they're gone. More people than not, never finding the attitude, the belief, the inspiration to grab opportunities and tap into their potential and do things that are mind-blowing. Do the impossible. Do the possible that for you thought was impossible. Maybe not for others, but for you thought it was impossible for you. Potential. To tap into that understanding. I can do this. There's two types of people in the Bible when it comes to potential. There are those that God positioned but didn't think they have the potential, first of all. God would grab them, give them a calling that they could not deny. God obviously saw the potential in them to do what He called them to do, but they struggled with seeing it for themselves. They couldn't see it. You know, I can't help but wonder when God came to Noah and said, I want you to build this big old boat for me. He didn't have a clue what a boat was, didn't know what rain was, didn't know what a flood was. The dude was a farmer. He was used to holding hoes and shovels and plows. He wasn't used to holding hammers and chisels and nails and saws, whatever he had to use as a carpenter. God saw in him the potential to build a boat, but maybe he only saw the potential to be a farmer. This is all I can do. Not that there's anything wrong with being a farmer, but maybe he thought, this is all I really have the ability to do, is this right here. God's saying, no, I want you to do this. Well, wouldn't you be better off with a carpenter? No, I want you to do it. You have the potential to do this. We hear that word all the time in sports. All the time. They'll be talking about a football player or a basketball player and how good he's doing, and they'll say, but he's got the potential to go way beyond this. They're saying he has the potential, the ability to do even more than he's done. Now, he hasn't done it yet. She hasn't done it yet, but that we see the ability is there. If we can convince them and inspire them to tap into that potential. Michael Jordan was one of those guys that don't know when he finally saw the potential in himself, but the people around him didn't seem to see it. He began to see it himself. The Bible's full of stories where God saw it, but the people couldn't see it. God came to Moses. Call of God that couldn't be denied. It was a burning bush experience because Moses didn't know who God was. Moses did not have a connection with God. Moses was not walking with God. So Moses had this in-your-face burning bush experience that he could not deny. God said, I want you to go. I want you to face Pharaoh. I want you to set my people free. Does anybody know what Moses' occupation was at the time that this happened? He was a shepherd. He was a shepherd. That's who he was. That was his identity. That was where he was extracting his potential from. I'm going to be a better shepherd. God said, I want you to go be a savior. I want you to lead a whole nation, probably 2 million people. Go lead them into freedom. Moses, like many of us, began to debate it with God. Well, how can I do this? I don't have the potential to be a great speaker. I don't have the potential to be very authoritative when I'm around people of authority. Don't know if people will listen to me. Don't really know if I've got the plan. See, God's looking at it going, you know how to lead sheep. You know how to lead people. See, He's just simple in how to. If you know how to lead sheep from this pasture to this pasture, you know how to lead people from this place to this place. And Moses can't see that. Well, I've only got the potential to lead sheep. God's like, no, you've got the potential to lead human beings. They're debating, and Moses is standing there, and he's like, oh, I just don't think I can do this. I don't have that kind of potential. And God's saying, Moses, what's that in your hand? Said it's a staff. You know what a staff is, right? It's a stick. You know what a boomerang is that won't come back to you, right? A stick. I want to make sure you're awake. Those who chuckled are still awake. The rest of you, I just got too deep for you for the moment. So let's pull back up. God said, Moses, what's that in your hand? He said, it's a staff, it's a stick. It's a piece of dead wood. That's what it was. It was a piece of dead wood. He said, Moses, throw it on the ground. He threw it on the ground and it turned into a... Now we try to read into all this. Now what's the snake mean? Blah, blah, blah. And the snake, you're evil and not like us. That wasn't even the point. That it could have turned into a giraffe. The point wasn't about it being a snake. The point was that it became a living thing. A dead thing became a living thing when he took what was in his hand and he threw it to the earth. What he thought was dead came alive. God's trying to say, Moses, there's all kinds of things in your ability toolbox, in your capabilities, in your potential. There's all kinds of things, and you're not going to ever know that that's in you till you learn to cast that thing to the ground. You sow that thing to the earth. You begin to plant that thing in the earth. You begin to do that thing. And you're going to be shocked and surprised what you're really capable of. The Bible tells many, many, many stories of God coming to human beings and saying, I want you to do this for me. You've got the potential to do this. And we argue with God, and God's saying, but if you'll just take what you've got where you're at, and if you begin to use it, I want to prove something to you. You can do this. Most of us, we look at ourselves in the mirror, and we often don't see it. But I want you to know that God sees it. And if you begin to take what's in your hand, what's in your heart, what's in your mind, take it and begin to use it. God wants to show you something. That's the first type of person in the Bible. God calls them, He positions them, but they can't believe they've got the potential. The other type of person is those that God calls, but those people just happen to believe, I really do have the potential for this. It's not haughtiness, it's not arrogance, it's not cockiness, it's not pride. It's a person who has come into the self-revelation that understands and believes, I can do more with my life than what I'm doing. God calls those people just like He calls the other people. The difference is these people believe it and they begin to look for opportunities to do it. They end up positioning themselves after God calls them. When Joshua, if you were here last week, when Joshua returned with the 12 spies, the 10 said, we can't do this. We're too weak. We don't have the potential for this. And Joshua stood up and Caleb by his side and said, oh, contraire, we can do this. At that moment, Joshua positioned himself to take Moses' place 40 years later. God saw it. God heard it. Joshua was saying, oh no, we do have the potential to do this. We can do this. God saw it. Did God plan to call him in the heavens long before in the natural? Of course. But I'm telling you, that is the day that I think God said, that's it. That's it. He sees it. He sees his capabilities. He sees that this can be done. David was anointed as a child by Samuel to become king. I don't know how David processed that. My guess is he didn't process it very well. God says, I want you to be the next king. He grows up as a little boy. I don't know how many years it was between that and when he finally took his lunch to his brothers as they were facing the Philistines with Goliath out there taunting. But if you were here last week and we went through that story and David comes and all he's doing is bringing a sack lunch to his brothers and he hears the taunting of Goliath and he says, what's that? And he said, well, that's Goliath. You know, he's like 9.5 feet tall and he wants to kill everybody. That's why we're all sitting here, shuddering in the trenches and none of us are going out there. And David said, well, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Yeah, I'll fight him. That day that David said, I will do this, he positioned himself in the earth to be the next king. God had already positioned him in the heavens. That day, David, believing in the potential of God, positioned himself in the earth. David had been a young man who had been tapping his potential. He said, I killed a lion. I killed a bear. I can do this. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. He understood he had potential to be more than a slave, more than a servant, more than a pig farmer. I apologize if there's any pig farmers here today. We appreciate you. Pork happens to be my 4th favorite thing in life. You're doing good. This is in a Hebrew culture. We ain't dissing you at all today if you're raising pigs. David didn't see himself as the youngest son in a small, weak family of an insignificant tribe. David just said, I can do this. I have been tapping my potential. I've been tapping it. I think I'm capable. I think I'm able. And he went for it. People like Joshua and David, and even if we move up into the New Testament with people like Peter. Jesus is pouring and pouring him, trying to extract potential, and Peter gets such a bad rap because the dude obviously has a little bit of dysfunctionality that he's trying to work through. He's an emotional basket case. He's hotly wired. The dude should not be qualified on any level to be following Jesus as a disciple, which is why Jesus chose him. The day they were in the boat and the storm kicked up, and they're fearing for their life. They think they're going to drown because at that point, Jesus is not in the boat with them in this story. They look out. They think it's a ghost. It looks like Jesus. Peter says, Lord, if that's you, bid me to come to you. Ask me to come to you. I'll do it. He gets out of the boat and he walks on the water. Yeah, we know the rest of the story. He takes his eyes off Jesus and he begins to sink. I think he sank slowly, though. He didn't just go, oh, and was gone. I'm not interested today that we know if you take your eyes off Jesus, you start sinking in life. We know. Point being, the dude did something pretty incredible that no human being would believe they had the potential to do. It's the moral of the story. Jesus saying, look what I'm doing. I'm walking on water. You know I'm the second Adam, right? You know I'm a human being. You know I'm the first fruits of what you're to become, right? You know whatever I do, you can do even greater. Get it? Yes. But you know you're walking on water, right? Yeah, you can do this too. You have the potential to do everything you're seeing me do. Cast out devils, heal the sick, speak to nature. And if you've got the authority to do that, then you've got the authority to choose a vocation that's in your heart and become that. Finish school, have a solid marriage, raise a family, build that house. You've got the potential to do anything. There ain't nothing more extreme than walking on water, baby. Nothing. I said, Lord, give me the word, and I'll try to do what you're doing. I said, come on. He steps out of the boat, and he begins to walk on water. I tell you what, you all can give him problems the rest of your life because he took his eyes off Jesus like y'all never done that. How many here has ever walked on water even one step? I think Jesus was proud of him. Yeah, there was a lesson to keep your eyes on me and you can keep doing this. But he did it. He did it. We've got to learn to position our potential. Let me tell you just a couple things here about potential before we get out of this place. Your potential is limited to what you think about yourself. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is. You will be exactly who you believe you can be. Not who I believe you can be, not who your mama thinks you can be, who you believe you can be. Your potential will take you as far as you can see it. As far as you can see it. Now the problem is a lot of us, if not most of us, we see ourselves based on things people have told us about ourselves. If we didn't learn anything else from the garden, we should learn how dangerous it is to entertain the wrong conversations with the wrong people. You got this guy and this gal, they're ruling and reigning. They're in the garden of God. They're walking with God, man. They're in dominion authority. This lady has one conversation with the wrong person, and it goes downhill fast. Our parents are programming us from the time we're very little. Either, oh, that's beautiful, baby, or what's that stupid thing supposed to be? Oh, baby, that is beautiful, man. I'm so proud of you. we kept Eden this weekend. Hannah and Eden playing all weekend, so they get the color and stuff out. Eden takes his coloring book, she gets the crayon, and it's like, you know, she's this tall, you know. Hannah's always on my lap, so Eden's always on my lap. So they're up there, they got color and stuff. I can't see the TV. I'm not complaining because I'm loving what's going on. And she's like, shh, with this orange crayon. And then Hannah says, you can tear that out if you want, Eden. You know, acting like, you know, you can have this. She just wanted out of her coloring book. I knew what she was doing. She tears it out, and Eden turns around and she says, you want me to go put this on the refrigerator? So I suspect if you go to the Smith house, you're going to see some Eden art on their refrigerator. It's like, yeah, go put that on the refrigerator. That's awesome. Or we can say, no, that's a brand new refrigerator. Don't you dare put that on my refrigerator. You just said your refrigerator is more important than their potential. You see, and this goes on and goes on because teenagers, can you plug yours just for a second? The rest of you that's already been there, they need you. See, I'm trying to extract their potential here. Parents, you are the primary convincing them that nothing is impossible. They won't know it if you don't tell them. I know the day will come, as we've talked about, where you may be dumber than mud to them. But when they're little, there ain't nobody like Daddy and Mommy. And if you're proud of them, if you brag on them, man, it just extracts and extracts. And they begin to tap, 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 tap that potential. Our potential is limited to what we think. As we think in our heart, so we are. What do you think about yourself? Who have you been listening to? Some of you have been ripped apart on your jobs. And you need to go back and look at those situations that discouraged you and pulled you down. And begin to just play head games with you, with your self-esteem and your self-worth. You've got to go back now and you've got to look at those things through an adult mind and say, now what really happened there? Because some of those situations you may not have been tapping your potential, and an employer may have got really aggravated at you about that. You've got to learn to take ownership where you need to. And in the situations where people were just mean and they didn't know what they were talking about and they were ripping you apart, you got to let that go. You are who you think you are, not who I think you are. I believe in you. I believe you can do it. But if you don't believe it, I watch it all the time. How many parents here would say that one of your biggest concerns in parenting is that your children will not extract the potential that you know is in them? I'm pushing on my daughter. It's like, baby, it's time to start with guitar lessons, time to start with piano lessons, and we agreed she could learn to play everything Justin Bieber plays. So we got your keys, we got your guitar, and we got drums. It's like, yeah. She goes through these phases. She told me last week, Daddy, I don't want to take dance anymore. It's like, well, you know, when you're 21, you can make that decision. No, I'm going to extract. I'm going to push. I'm going to even risk offending her from time to time because I'm not just going to let her go off and play video games and watch TV the rest of her life and dummy herself down by amusing herself with somebody else's potential. She's got to tap her. She's got to tap into that creative nature and problem solve. We're raising a generation that doesn't know how to problem solve anymore. That's why it's so drama-driven today. Everything's so drama-driven because nobody knows how to resolve conflicts. Because watching TV and playing games doesn't teach you how to problem solve. It doesn't really enhance your creative ability. We've got to get back to being intentional, to position ourselves, position our potential. Your potential is limited to what you think. Your potential is limited to the degree that you face problems and don't run. That's what I was just talking about. God intentionally forces even us into situations that are less than perfect, where we have to face adversity, we have to face challenges, we have to face problems, because it's in those seasons we learn to tap deep within us and find problem-solving capabilities. Here's what I think I will do. When we run, we've got too much flight mentality in America today. We just cut and we run and we go hide under the bed and we curl up in the fetal position and we won't answer the phone. And I'm sorry if that comes off a little bit mean to anybody here, but I'm telling you, there may occasionally be someone who's been through something so horrendous, they are justified in doing that. The rest of us just haven't learned how to face any conflict in life. It's a reality. If you're going to run from it, you're going to be running your whole life. You're going to spend your whole time running from conflict, caught up in the drama, and you're never going to tap the potential that's in you. In this room today, there's the potential to go considerably beyond where we have as a local church. You and your families, in your marriage, with your parenting skills and techniques, with the vocations and the entrepreneurship and the business ideas and the ability to make wealth. Man, we put ourselves in a status quo when we settle there because we don't have the mindset of the sons of God, kings and priests in the earth. We don't have the attitude of fighters who says, you're not going to stop me. All things are possible. We're not tapping our potential. Just not tapping our potential. Your potential is limited to what you think. Your potential is limited to the degree that you face problems and don't run. Your potential is limited to the crowds you run with. You hang with a bunch of people who could care less about their potential, you won't tap yours. Remember Abraham, the father of our faith? God went to his dad, Terah, and said, I want you to go to Canaan. This was long before Moses and all that crew. He said, I want you to go to Canaan. I've got a land there for you, a special place. Terah went halfway. He settled in a place called Haran. He named the place after one of his sons. It meant dry, deserted, barren. And the Bible says he died there. When Abraham's father died, God went to Abraham and said, now Abraham, will you go to this place? Will you not settle for status quo? Tap the potential that I put in you, that I put in your father, and he wouldn't tap that potential. Abraham's like, yeah, I'll do that. And he said, okay, first thing I need you to do then, I need you to pack your bags, and I need you to leave your family and all these people you've been hanging out with. That's hard. If you think you're going to tap your potential to become something great when you're hanging out with a bunch of people who could care less about being great, good luck on how that works out for you. Your potential will always be limited to the people, the crowds you run with. It's within the peer groups that we run with that we find inspirations. We can run with groups that are just drama-driven, dysfunctional. They could care less about their future. They could care less about what God saw for their life when they were in their mother's womb and God was knitting their body parts together. People who could care less about that. Those are people we reach out to, we minister to, but those are not the people that are to be my influences in life. You want to tap your potential, you hang out with people that are tapping their potential. You hang out with people that have tapped their potential. You hang out with people who've done more than what somebody thought they could do. Let that inspire you. Let that change how you view yourself. Our potential is limited to what we think about ourselves. It's limited to the degree that we face our problems in life and don't run. Our potential is limited to the crowds that we run with. Our potential is limited then to the opportunities that we're taking or not taking. If you've been here, you know we talk a lot about the mailbox syndrome, the lottery ticket syndrome. You guys like it when I jump down here because you know I'm not going to look at my paper anymore, huh? That's when it gets good, because now we can just go anywhere. I tell you, that mailbox syndrome where I'm going to lay here in limbo and one day I'm going to go to the mailbox and I'm going to open it up and there's going to be that something in the mailbox and it's going to change my life. Man, that's a mindset for losers, I'm just going to tell you. And if you hang out with people with that mindset, you're hanging out with losers and you're going to be a loser. It's just how life works. If you think you'll be an exception, you are wrong. You will not be an exception. You kids are at a place in life now where you're forming your little groups within the groups, right? Hey, I'm getting ready to preach now. And we're hanging out with people that we bond with for whatever reason. You know, musicians like to hang out together, and stoners like to hang out together, and golfers like to hang out together, and skaters like to hang out together, and you know, broken-hearted girls like to go find other little broken-hearted girls so they can cry on each other's shoulders. You know how it works. Right? Am I right? That's good preaching. You have to learn now that while you can have your friendships based on whatever, you have to be very, very intentional that the people you are hanging out with is going the same direction you want to go. Now, if you want to go down, go find some other friends that want to go down with you and you all have a party. But if you've got plans for your life, I want you to know that these are the years that will determine where you're going to go later on and how fast you're going to get there. Make sure you're hanging out with kids who say, you know what, I don't have this whole God thing figured out yet, but I'm working on it. I may not be a great apostle or a great prophet, but you know what? I understand that my life is found in God somehow, and I need to be in church, and I need to be worshiping, and I need to be listening to the teachings, and I need to be intentional. I need a prayer life. I need to be studying the Bible. That stuff doesn't come easy, but I know I need to be doing that, and you begin to discipline yourself. And the easiest way to discipline yourself is to hang out with other people who are also doing the same thing. Because if you have 4 friends and you're the only one trying to chase after God, it ain't going to be much of a chase. You adults, it's no different. I mean, we still got folks here that are hanging out in the clubs on Saturday night and so hungover they can't come to church half the time on Sunday morning. When they do come in, they get all excited and happy, and that they can't seem to get over that hump because when they're here, they're hanging out with God's people. When they leave here, they're hanging out with not God's people, and it just keeps pulling down. When they leave here, they have full intentions, I'm going to do this thing. And they leave inspired, and they're wired, and man, they're flaming up, and they go and they get with the crowd who could care less about all that. And it pulls them right back down. Next thing you know, you got someone up here that was hooping and hollering and worshiping, and by Sunday night, they're out smoking weed somewhere behind the barn with all their buddies. And we never get past that point of being more than who we are. I want you to know that God has made it more than clear when He looks at humanity. He handpicks what we call the weaklings in life, the Davids, the people who don't seem to have a whole lot going on, physically speaking. God always picks those people to make a point to you that because most of us can relate to them more than anybody. Look at our lives and go, I don't know what all I can do, I'm not sure. And God's handpicking these people, reminding us over and over and over again, you have potential you haven't tapped yet. Do you see it? Do you believe it? Do you believe it? And then God puts us in situations where we're surrounded, it seems like, with conflict and dilemmas all the time. But God has put us in those situations because that's how He helps us find our potential. It's not in times of peace we tap potential. It's in times of conflict. Like T.D. Jakes says, you don't know what's in you till you get in a good fight. You just don't know. We've got to make sure that we're hanging with people that are going where we're going and are where we want to go. And we've got to be intentional because there's the possibilities of great power in you. Great possibilities. You are not a grasshopper. You're kings and priests, and you've got all the potential to be that. You want it? Yes. Are you willing to believe you have it? Yes. Then stand with me.